So this project that we have on view downstairs, I learned today from Alberto that at one point you were living in a pigeon coop. So this
Yeah, that's
interest
true.
with
Yeah,
pigeons
yeah,
started
yeah,
a long time ago.
yeah, yeah.
So where was that?
That was in Providence, Rhode Island, while I was in school. I ended up uh, renting out this like little. It was about a 10 by 10, uh, like little, almost like a glassed-in widow's walk on the roof of a building, and it was like just big enough for a bed and a desk, and then I had actually I had a loft bed with a desk below it, and then there was a window, and it had been used as a pigeon loft before, and I actually had kept pigeons before, so I just decided it was kind of an ideal place to keep pigeons, so I still had pigeons there, but I had like a little bit of I mean, they could get into the other part. Sometimes they, land on my bed when I was sleeping and stuff. But for the most part, it was a little bit of
a little separation.
There was like a little.
How did you start training pigeons? How did you get into?
I kind of got interested when I was a kid. I had found a pigeon that was hurt and took care of it, and then when I went to let it go, it kept coming back, and that kind of sort of you sort of almost feel like you have a special connection with the animal after that. And pigeons are very smart. They recognize people and voices and different things like that too. So in a way you do. And then I started reading more about them and whatnot. Books at the library and stuff. And then later on sought out a couple older guys that I noticed had pigeon coops and started learning stuff from them and whatnot. Yeah.
So when you decided to work on a project training pigeons to be smugglers and filmmakers, how did you start to do that?
Well, I mean, I had thought about the potential, honestly, before, I had made several trips to Havana, working on the St. Patrick's Day Parade project, and I had always thought about and I had spent a lot of time in Key West over the years too, actually, and I had thought a lot about the proximity between the two places, and just my knowledge of what a pigeon can do, and I sort of had been kind of envisioning the possibility of this whole thing, but then I felt I guess sort of around, when some of these things started to surface with the NSA and whatnot, and I guess I kind of started to feel that it seemed like the time to do this particular project had arrived, because I felt.
I sort of think of the Hogan's Heroes, the little hat with a little, old flighter pigeon outfit or something.
I don't know what you're talking about. But I watched a lot of Hogan's Heroes, but I don't remember that part.
I don't know if there was one of them, but they always had ways of escaping, and the pigeon, or they would dress. They were always strange.
Did they have pigeons on Hogan's Heroes?
That's what I envisioned. I've seen a pigeon dressed up somewhere.
They did? I don't remember the pigeons on Hogan's Heroes. Yeah. The little French guy had the pigeons? That makes sense. Yeah, I mean they definitely use them a lot. They use them in pretty much every military operation, up until the Vietnam War, when then they started to really just use those really big radios that now obviously everything's cellular and whatnot. But that was basically how everybody relayed messages and back to.
And so you had pictured this idea of sailing the pigeons into Havana and releasing them and have them fly back to Key West. So you created a base in Key West, or how did you do that?
I built a loft. Man, how did I leave my fly down when I'm up here in front of all these people? I said, what's the matter with me? Sorry. Yeah. I built a loft down in Key West. Yeah, and that's sort of like the pit. You train the pigeons really to go back to one location, and then it's just sort of a matter of spending long periods of time taking them further and further distances away.
So did you take them out on sailboats and then release them?
Yeah, there was a lot of taking them out on the water and that kind of thing, and yeah, exactly. And it takes a little bit longer sometimes to train them over water, but yeah.
So how long did it take you to train them?
Well, it took about 6 months. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I was down there a little bit earlier, just like familiar. It takes a while with getting them, just homing them to that loft and building the loft and all that kind of stuff. So it dragged out. I mean, one of the things is wherever they're first released from when they're really small is where they're gonna return to, and so I had to get as many young birds as possible. I have a loft in Brooklyn that I was keeping pigeons in, and I had some young ones, but I also had to get other young ones that around the appropriate time for what I needed to do, and ship them down to Key West. So that's the
you
postman.
ship them with the.
That's a bird box, like a special like postal pigeon carrying box, and you can see that guy seems a little confused, Yeah, but yeah. So then basically, yeah, that's the, yeah, and then I kind of Key West has become very expensive, and most of the time I was sort of on Stock Island, which is kind of right next to Key West. It's sort of more like there's still sort of a working waterfront there with shrimp boats and stuff like that, and it's kind of more like the working class section of it's kind of like I would sort of say whenever I was going from Stock Island to Key West that I was going to Manhattan,
From Brooklyn.
From or something, yeah. But so I moved into this derelict boat that was in this boatyard, and that was filled with termites, and which I didn't realize are somehow like when there's like a full moon, one particular full moon in the spring where like they just all come out in like these huge
termites.
Yeah, like massive like flying swarms of termites. It was really, yeah. I don't know, I'm getting off the subject. But anyways, so I was staying in this derelict boat in this boatyard, and then there was all these wrecks around there, and I started kayaking around and stripping, going onto these wrecks and stripping off all the doors and stuff, and then going around at night. There's a lot of great like just wood that I was able to salvage just wandering around the streets at night. There's a lot of like hand painted signs and stuff like that people just discard. So I started using this. I had this kind of old boatyard as my studio, which was kind of nice, and started building the loft all out of stuff that I just found wandering the streets. You can sort of see it's coming along there. But
so as a practicing artist, you have a pretty unorthodox approach. It's more of like a lifestyle. You make objects as you go along, or do you think about these things as you're doing them, or just things unfold?
I don't know how to answer that. I guess.
I mean, there weren't classes at RISD talking about how to build pigeon coops. You took.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's probably true with a lot of artists, though, that are doing things that they're, isn't necessarily a category that it fits into as far as what materials you're using. I don't know, but.
So,
yeah.
But you choose all these on purpose, or is they come together just as?
I like doing things that kind of, I mean, I obviously I like using found materials and trying to use as little of to try to be as resourceful as possible is very important to me, and I think that also just the nature of not just for like environmental reasons, but also I think just the idea behind some of the maybe the philosophy behind a lot of the work that I do, like particularly in in this project, you're sort of using uh, technology, or not necessarily technology, but using means that have been used since ancient Sumer, like to and trying to go up against a multi-million dollar surveillance equipment. I think I like to try to use things that are very accessible, and also have everything sort of needs to make sense to me, and it has to relate to the area that I'm working in. So if I can use materials from the area, then I feel like it seems more authentic too, I suppose.
And so you made little harnesses for your pigeons.
Yeah.
Did you have a label on them, like with your artist signature, and say, "If lost, please return to"?
I did on certain, like some of them had little messages in them, but it really depended upon what they were doing and what they were carrying, while I was training them and whatnot, because at some point, I mean, Key West is a really small place, and there were a lot of people that live in Key West that were involved in making this whole thing happen. But I was still trying to keep it as quiet as possible. And, as you're training the birds, sometimes, that's sort of the thing with training pigeons, is kind of like a little bit of a process of elimination too, because some of them are better at returning than others, and some of them just go feral and don't come back. But it's a little bit more of a problem if they go feral and somebody ends up finding it, and it has something like
a camera on its mouth.
Yeah, or worse, a cigar or something like that, because it's not like people take. There's one thing for sure, is that smuggling of all kinds of things is still a very, very real part of what goes on in Key West. And there are definitely plenty of people that I was hanging out with that were involved in smuggling everything from drugs to people and all kinds of stuff. And it's something that certainly the police and Homeland Security and various different agencies down there don't take lightly at all. I was not trying to draw any attention to myself early on in the project, but there were certain points in time where there was, depending upon what the bird was doing, where there would be notes to about the footage to try and get it back, depending upon what I thought was on the footage and whether or not it seemed like it was incriminating or not. Yeah, because we went through a lot of harnesses. A lot of harnesses and a lot of cameras. Yeah. And
you did?
Yeah, and they get very expensive.
So here's a picture of the camera. Mm-hmm. What kind of a camera is this?
Well, there are different types that I used, and I had to modify them quite a bit too, and that took a while just to, figure out if this was actually going to be possible. Pigeons can actually carry a pretty significant amount of weight, and in fact, there was cameras attached to pigeons going, back to the, some of the, earliest cameras that were invented, where somebody figured out a way to attach one to a pigeon, and it was like, it was like this big. It was huge, But and they managed to do some like overhead shots of Paris, I think, in the around the turn of the century or something like that. At any rate,
and if you all haven't seen it, down in the black box, that we have 3 films. So the films of the pigeons flying over Havana, and then one is on like a cruise ship, a day ship,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
and then flying back into Key West. So you will see in the footage downstairs, the pigeons wore a little harness with the cameras on them.
Yeah, so I mean, I had to try to figure out a way to make the batteries lighter, and also to make sure that the camera was going to last for the as long as possible for the duration of the flight, and then which also involved trying to have some of them set at a delay so they would turn on later, and basically to make sure that I captured both them taking off and landing and everything else. And I was concerned about the weight just because they had to go a pretty far distance over water, and just for the birds' safety and whatnot. So we managed to get them really light, but
and how did it go? So did you just sail right into Havana and dock? And
I can't really talk about what happened. Like, I don't really know how the birds got to Havana. I will say there were two different. I think generally with all the things that I do, there's always a plan, and then there's a backup plan in case the first plan doesn't go well. And I don't really know how those birds got into Havana, but
they didn't have person-to-person visas or humanitarian.
That there were two different ways that they might have gotten in there, and one of them might have worked, and one of them might have gone really, really bad. Yeah, that's what I would say. But
but you were able to greet them as they arrived in Key West, or were they there when you got back?
Who said I went anywhere? I can say that I don't know exactly how long I have a rough idea of how long it took for the birds to come back. I'm normally, somebody who races pigeons and really trains pigeons for racing, and a pigeon that isn't carrying a camera should actually be able to do. It's not really 90 miles. It's actually more like 110 miles, especially to Stock Island. That a pigeon can do that in like 5 hours. Some of these pigeons I believe took closer to 10 hours to get back, and some of them didn't return for like 2 weeks. And and there's still some still some popping up actually, like even like after the project was pretty much done, like, and it was in the paper and this and that, like I started getting some emails from people that were like, I think I might have one of your birds, but and what I didn't realize too was that the birds were going to take breaks. I never really thought about that, and that was sort of what happened in one of the.
What's union contract?
Yeah, and one of the that's one of the things that was the big surprise for me in the project was that when we were watching the footage, there was one of the birds lands on a party boat, and there's just all these people hanging out listening to Jimmy Buffett, and like there's actually a whole long conversation of this guy just like hitting on this girl, but it's like too long. I had to like cut it out, and the bird's just like filming the whole thing, but then they see the bird and they sort of think that it's like got a bomb attached to it and all this kind of stuff, and then the bird eventually just takes off. But I wasn't expecting that to happen at all. So they kind of, I guess they took their time, yeah. But
And then sort of turning all of this idea into a gallery show with the portraits of the pigeons, of the directors.
Yeah. Well, each bird, I decided when I started out, I started out with 50, which was I would have liked to have started out with 100, but I honestly just couldn't. I couldn't afford to get any more birds than that, and it was also just a space. It's not just the cost of the birds, but there's just the feed and the size of the loft that you're going to need to build, and the materials, and it just seems like and also just coming up with that many young pigeons at that time of year. Um, so yeah, because everything was sort of a little bit pressed for time. So then, basically, I decided to. I had 50 birds, and I decided to to train 25 of them to carry cigars, and the other 25 to carry the harnesses with the cameras. And the ones that carried cigars, I named after famous smugglers throughout history, particularly like American smugglers or smugglers that had, influenced American history and whatnot in different ways. But it, kind of a wide range. And then the other 25 I named after filmmakers who had been arrested before.
Oh,
and
hence the Mel Gibson.
Yeah.
I wondered why.
So, and some of those filmmakers are, people that were, political activists, and then some of them are just people like Mel Gibson, yeah. But yeah, so that was what the other 25 were named after, yeah. And then each one had its own special harness with its name embroidered onto it, and each bird had different bands, that color coding them, and I took a photograph of each one and painted a portrait of them, and sort of got a wide variety of different different birds, all homing pigeons, but I tried to mix them up so that they would be easy to identify while I was training them and whatnot, so they weren't all the same color. Yeah.
I also want to ask you about the drawing that we showed earlier, and we have 2 drawings downstairs. That seems to be one of the medium that appears the same style in different bodies of work. Or I saw the MTA, the subway commission that you did is the same kind of drawing technique. You want to talk about that a little?
Just the drawing technique?
Yeah, I mean using that kind of paper, it's sort of old-fashioned looking.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, I guess a lot of the drawings that I do, have definitely been influenced both by working as a tattoo artist and also just a lot of like maritime folk art that I spent a lot of time looking at growing up, and as far as the I think that somewhere between those two experiences, I kind of developed that style, I suppose. And in regards to the paper, I don't really know what to say about the paper.
Well, I think it's very distinctive as we look through. Yeah, so here, I like the way you encase the cigars and the beautiful portraits.